John chapter 6, verses 5, 6, and 7. In the New International Version goes this way. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do.
Right.
Philip answered, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one of them to have a bite." And so, on this morning, I want to talk about the test that Jesus gave.
Right.
The test Jesus gave. That verse 6 says, Jesus asked this only to test Philip. Why? Because he already had in mind what he was going to do. So, the test Jesus gave. You may be seated.
Amen.
The test Jesus gave. You know, I realized just a few days ago that we come into this world facing tests.
Amen.
I have to tell you that I didn't ever really think about that until a few days ago. You see, my baby nephew named Saya was born on Wednesday, November 13th.
All right.
And so, as a newborn, I discovered that he entered the world facing a test.
Right.
You see, what happened is that this little baby boy had to take something called a hearing screening or a hearing test.
All right.
And it made me think in that moment, wow, we enter this world being tested.
All right. Amen.
They put these little devices on his little ears so that they could test whether or not he could hear.
All right.
And I tell you, the first time they administered the test, he failed the test. So then the next day they came back and they tested his ears again. Well, I tell you, when they tested again, he failed in his right ear, or his left ear. He failed, but he passed in the right ear. So then he had to take the test again, and then guess what? He passed.
All right.
So my brother, this is his little boy, Saya, my brother was really relieved that Saya passed the test.
Amen.
I think we all in here have discovered that when you pass a test, you feel relieved.
That's right. Amen.
How many people in here have ever taken a test? This is Youth Day.
Right.
Young people, I know you've taken tests. But if you've ever been a baby, then please know that you've probably already been tested.
Right.
Even if you can't remember it, you've been put to the test.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but one of the best things, or two of the best things about a test, is to pass a test, and the other thing is when the test is over.
Right.
I mean, is there anyone in here who enjoys being tested? Perhaps. Maybe somebody does. But you know, there are all types of tests that we want to pass. Think about the tests that humanity faces. I mean, you have to take what? Written tests? Some of us have taken oral tests. We've taken essay tests. We've taken placement tests. Some of us have taken standardized tests. We've taken personality tests. And some of us, people have tested our patience. But no matter what kind of test it is, I think we can agree that we want it to be over and we want to pass it. But you know, whether we like tests or not, tests are a way of measuring things. A test is many times it's needed because it measures our knowledge.
All right.
A test measures our comprehension. Tests measure our ability, and it measures our progress. So all tests have a purpose.
All right. All right.
In our text, what we find is that Jesus gives one of his disciples by the name of Philip a test.
All right.
Jesus looks up. The text says that he sees a large crowd coming toward him. And so he raises a question to the disciple called Philip.
All right.
Here comes the test question. The test question for Philip is, where should we buy bread for these people to eat?
All right.
That was the question. Philip's test only had one question. Young people, how many questions are usually on the test? 50. But Philip only had one. One question, Philip. where should we buy bread for these people to eat? Now, Jesus did this only to test Philip because Jesus already had in mind what he was going to do. But he simply raises this question. Jesus administering a test. This is a test. This is only a test. But would Philip pass the test? Well, before thinking about passing the test, perhaps we should consider that the test Jesus gave, Jesus didn't disappear on Philip.
All right.
Jesus was present for the test. Now, young people, I don't know about you, but I remember being tested, and sometimes the person giving the test would leave the room. Other times they would stay in the room, but there were some times when the test giver would leave the room. But not in this case. Philip had to face a test, but Jesus stayed with him. He did not have to deal with the test all by himself. Now, there was a situation going on, but Jesus was there. And that's good news when there's a situation going on. Jesus doesn't leave. Some of us have had friends before. When there's a situation, they leave. Some of us have family members. When there's a situation, they leave. Whenever you have money in your pocket, it lasts for a while, but then there's a situation and it leaves. But during this test, Jesus was present. And young people, in your life, you're going to be tested. And it's not always going to be tests that you find out or that you discover only happen in school. Sometimes you're going to be tested by your friends. You're going to be tested. Someone's going to say, come on and try drugs. Let's do a little something. You're going to be tested because somebody's going to say, it's just a cigarette. Somebody else is going to say, you can have sex. Go on, it feels good. You're going to be tested even outside of the classroom. Someone's going to want you to cheat. And then someone else is going to want you to break the law. And then somebody's going to bully you to the point they want you to take your life. But the good news about being tested is that even when your parents aren't around, even when you can't find a friend who really loves you and you're surrounded by enemies, even when you find yourself in a situation, Jesus won't leave you. So you're going to be tested, and it won't just happen while you're young. It's going to happen even when you get older. You see, you're going to get over 18, and when you become over 18 in the United States of America, they say that you can do what you want to because you're legal. Oh, and once you hit 21, they're going to say that you can do whatever you want to because you're legal. And the older you get, you have to be very careful because about the time you start to reach, I don't know, maybe 70s, 80s, you feel like you've been here long enough that you can say whatever you want to say. You feel like you can do whatever you want to do. But what I love about the Lord is that God sees us as all of his children. He doesn't care about your chronological age. If you are a child of God, then you need to understand that the power that God has over you means that you can't do whatever you want to. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can't say whatever you want to. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can't go wherever you want to. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can't hang out with just anybody. Not when Jesus changes you. When the Lord changes you. It doesn't matter the test because you have Jesus on your side. So Philip was put to the test that Jesus gave, but Jesus did not leave him. And so Jesus is there, Philip is there, and so Philip attempts to answer the question. Well, kind of. So Jesus says, where should we buy bread for these people to eat? Philip did answer. He says, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one of these people to have a bite. So I guess Philip didn't really answer the question, but that was okay because Jesus had a plan. You see, these people's outcome when it came to being fed, it wasn't left up to Philip. It was left up to Jesus. So although Philip could not answer the question, Jesus had a plan. Thank God they didn't have to trust Philip. Thank God they didn't have to wait for Philip to make a way. Thank God they didn't have to put their faith in Philip. But the best thing they could do was to look to Jesus. Don't look to Philip. Jesus is the man with the plan. Don't look to Philip. He doesn't is the answer. You know Jesus is the answer for the world today. Before him there is no other. Jesus is the way. We can't put our trust in the Phillips of the world. You put your trust in that Philip spirit that doesn't even have the answer to the question. But Jesus is the man with the plan. He gives this test, and the good news is that Jesus got results. He got results. If you continue reading John chapter 6, verses 9, 10, and 11, you will find that right there in that crowd, there was a boy. And the boy was there, and he had 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. So right there in the midst, Jesus gets results. Because what he does is he has the people to sit down. That's order. Order is so very important. It's not a chaotic situation. He has these people to sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place. So nobody can say, well, we don't have anywhere to sit. What Jesus is saying, we can't see that vision. There's nowhere to sit. There's grass all over the place. Sit down. Like the man of God said. It can't be more than one head, because anything with more than one head is a monster. Sit down. Because you see, there was about 5,000 men there. And it doesn't even talk about the women and the children. So can you imagine if the people had not followed the man of God in that moment? Do you think they would have had anything to eat? No. But he says, sit down, and then after everyone is in order, Jesus takes the loaves from the little boy and he gives thanks. Jesus then distributes to all who were there, and they had as much as they wanted. Do you think they would have had as much as they wanted if they had not listened to the man of God? So they had what they wanted, and then he did the same with the fish. So again, Jesus got results. If the results were left to the people, they probably would have remained hungry. How many people know what it feels like to be hungry? Being hungry is no joke. I tell you, many of us, even here in America, we say that we feel hungry, but there are third world countries where people don't get a meal at all. You can probably remember the last time you ate, but there are some who can't remember the last time they ate. And so in this country, we're really blessed. And then there was a time when hunger was rampant, even within the African American community, because black folk were enslaved. So when black folk were enslaved, I passed cotton fields even on my way out here. And it was a reminder about how black folk in America, when there were shackles on their wrists and shackles on their ankles, how they were treated and how hunger was prevalent in the community. You see, they didn't eat the way that we eat right now. They didn't get to plan a meal like we're planning for on Thursday. You see, even if you read about the life of Frederick Douglass, found in his book, My Bondage and My Freedom, Frederick Douglass talks about what it was like for him, true story, to be a slave in America. This is the American history that we don't always hear. But if Frederick Douglass were here today, he'd tell you what hunger really looks like. If Frederick Douglass were here today, he'd tell you what hunger really feels like. You see, if you read the book, you'll find that he said that hunger was his boyhood companion. There are some young boys in here. When Frederick Douglass was your age, he had something with him all the time, and it was called hunger. He said, I have often been so pinched with hunger that I had to fight with the dog for the smallest crumbs that fell from the kitchen table. He said, I was glad when I won a single crumb in that combat. He said, many times I had to follow with eager step the waiting girl when she went out to shake the tablecloth so that I could get the crumbs or a small bone that was flung out for the cats. That's real hunger. He said our food was coarse cornmeal boiled. It was called mush. He said it was put into a large wooden tray or trough. And that's what pigs eat out of, young people. That's what horses eat out of. They would put all this mush in one place and sit it on the ground. He said as a boy, what would happen is they would call all the children in just like pigs. He said, and like so many pigs, we would come and devour the mush because we were that hungry. He said some would come naked because they didn't have any clothes. He said they would go and find oyster shells so that they could scoop up some of the mush. He said others would find pieces of shingle so they would scoop up some of the mush. And then he said for those who could not find that, they would just use their bare hands. And he said that the strongest among the children, they would get the strongest place or the best place because everybody's trying to eat. He said when they left there, few left satisfied. And the sad thing is that there are people who are still hungry today.
Yeah.
This is why we must give God thanks every day.
Right. That's right.
And young people, you may not like every piece of food that your parents or your grandparents prepare for you, but give thanks anyway.
Yeah.
And even on this Thanksgiving, I mean, when you're thinking about it, Frederick Douglass had mush or sometimes nothing at all.
Right.
So when you sit down on Thursday for your Thanksgiving dinner or your Thanksgiving afternoon dinner, if you have turkey, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
If you have stuffing and dressing, thank you, Jesus. If you have ham, thank you, Jesus. If you have chicken, thank you, Jesus. If you have mashed potatoes, somebody's getting hungry. Thank you, Jesus. If you have some candied yams, thank you, Jesus. Don't forget about the gravy. Thank you, Jesus. If you get some cranberry sauce, thank you, Jesus. Don't forget the sweet tea. Thank you, Jesus. If you get some biscuits, thank you, Jesus. If you get some rolls, thank you, Jesus. Did I say sweet potato pie? Thank you, Jesus. And if somebody can make a casserole, a good casserole, thank you, Jesus. Even if it's not that good, thank you, Jesus. And the macaroni and cheese, thank you, Jesus. All I'm saying is that when Thanksgiving Day comes, thank the Lord that we're able to eat the way that we're able to eat. Thank the Lord that we're able to have what we have. And don't just think about yourself and your family, but think about somebody else too. Bring somebody with you to church on Thursday. Feed somebody if you can. In this text, these people must have been mighty thankful.
Amen.
Think about it. They had nothing to eat. And all of a sudden, Jesus multiplies this food. They must have been very happy. I mean, somebody must have been in that grass and said, I can't sit here any longer. I can't sit in the green grass when Jesus has blessed me like this. Somebody over there had to stand up, I believe, and said, thank you, Jesus. Somebody over there probably stood up and did a dance in the grass. Thank you, Jesus. Somebody clapped their hands because they thanked God for another meal. Thank you, Jesus. Somebody was mighty happy because they were in the presence of the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Maybe even Philip. Maybe Philip even gave God a praise because, see, this lesson, this test must have taught Philip more about Jesus. You see, every test is meant to teach you something. So in this moment, Philip may have even thanked God. Praise Jesus, because I know more about Jesus today than I did on yesterday. That's what I like about this church, Zion Bethlehem. You see, your church focus, I saw it. Your church focus is learn to be great in ministry. Maybe Jesus was teaching Philip how to be great in ministry. Maybe Jesus was trying to expand Philip's mind. Maybe Jesus was being patient as a leader with Philip, and then Philip needed to follow Jesus' vision. Maybe this was a moment of greatness. That's why we should never give up on a test. Young people, what happens if you give up on a test? You fail. You should never give up on a test, even when God puts you to a test, because you're serving a God who never fails. You don't quit. Now is not the time to quit because you're up against a test. Now is not the time to quit because some people have failed. You will be victorious, but you can't quit. You will be victorious, but you've got to hold on. Jesus has shown us that you can pass the test. You see, you can pass the test because Jesus passed the test. You can pass any tough test in life because Jesus passed the test. There had never been a man to beat death. There had never been a man to pass that test. Oh, they thought that Jesus was a failure. You see, he was put to the test. So when they beat him, he looked like a failure. When he carried the cross, he looked like a failure. When they nailed him to the cross, he looked like a failure. When they put a crown of thorns on his head, he looked like a failure. When they pierced him in the side, he looked like a failure. When he died, he looked like a failure. When he stayed dead on Friday, he looked like a failure. When he was dead on Saturday morning, he looked like a failure. When he was dead on Saturday afternoon, he looked like a failure. When he was dead Saturday evening, he looked like a failure. But how many people know that things aren't always what they seem? It's not about what it looks like. I may not look victorious, but I'm not concerned about that right now. I may have to cry, but I'm not concerned about that right now. You may look at me funny, but I'm not concerned about that right now because it's not what it looks like. You see, I serve a mighty God who is able to pass the test. So because Jesus passed the test, I can pass the test. You see, on Sunday morning, he rose with all power. All power. Jesus passed the exam because he rose. Because he rose, we can have eternal life. So if you don't know Jesus, you better get to know him so you can win. If you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you better get that relationship so that you can win. Does anybody know about the power of Jesus? You may have thought that some things were over in your life. You almost threw in the towel, but then you experienced the power of Jesus. The power of Jesus means that he'll fix it. Won't he fix it? The power of Jesus means that he'll work it out. Won't he work it out? The power of Jesus means that he'll make a way. Won't he make a way? The power of Jesus means that he'll do it. Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Yes, he will. When you have Jesus on your side, you are a winner. Don't let the enemy make you think that you can't win. Because when you're with Jesus Christ, you're on the winning team. I said you're on the winning team. You're on the winning team. So hold fast to the arms of Jesus. Keep on holding on to the unchanging hand of Jesus, and he'll see you through. The test will be over, and you'll win. God bless you.